Try as they might, the Arizona Cardinals just couldn't stay out of the Sean Payton sweepstakes, and that is great news for the New Orleans Saints. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays in Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And this episode is sponsored by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more over at FanDuel.com/locked on. Check them out today to get started. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at what the bar is now for the New Orleans Saints. The play of 2022 kind of lost a little bit of the fan base there, or at least has the fan base kind of cocking their heads a little bit. So what has to happen in 2023 for the New Orleans Saints to win back sort of the trust of their fan base? We'll clarify that, discuss that. We'll also take a look at one of the things the New Orleans Saints must do in 2023 if they want to get back to the playoffs, which is more Taysom Hill. Got to get more Taysom Hill involved in 2023. That is, if he's on the roster. But first, good news. The Arizona Cardinals are back. Yes, the Arizona Cardinals now officially getting a meeting scheduled with the former New Orleans Saints head coach, Sean Payton, and that is great news for the New Orleans Saints. A couple of people reporting on this, but I believe the first report came from Howard Balzer, who said that that he had sources saying that the Sean Payton meeting with the Arizona Cardinals is on and will be on Thursday. So just a couple of days down the road here. So why is this good news for the New Orleans Saints? Well, there's a couple of different things here. You probably actually don't want the Saints to trade Sean Payton to the Arizona Cardinals because it's very unlikely you're going to get a first round pick in 2023 if you send him there. You could get one in 2024, however. So when do you want a quarterback? Do you want a quarterback now? Do you want a quarterback later, right? That's kind of the juggling act that you sort of have to do. And I think there's arguments to both, right? Maybe you have a quarterback that you really, really like. It's no secret at all that I like Hendon Hooker in this draft, assuming that everything checks out in terms of medicals. But do I like Caleb Williams more? Sure, of course. Who doesn't? So I think that there is a little bit of a conversation to be had here. Would it be better for the Saints to get the let's just say the mass of their draft capital in 2023 in return for Sean Payton, or get a larger portion of it in 2024, allowing them an opportunity to get a little bit mobile, get a little bit active in the trade market, which we know the New Orleans Saints, Mickey Loomis, have been in before, and potentially get after Caleb Williams? Well, that all sounds great, but the hardest part is who ends up with the number one overall pick in 2024? How do you project that this year? And would you be able to get them up out of the number one overall pick, knowing that there's a generational quarterback on the way, right? That's the hard part. And is that person or team that holds the number one overall selection in need of a quarterback? Because if they are, sorry to tell you, you're not getting the number one selection unless you are that team in the New Orleans Saints. But we know tanking kind of out of the question here. So why else would it be a good thing for the New Orleans Saints to have Arizona involved? I'll put it to you this way. The more teams that there are out there talking to Sean Payton about coming back to coaching, the more opportunities that there are for him to come back to coach, right? So if you have three teams, that's fine. But if you get a fourth team in there, then that means basically you've got four different chances for Sean Payton to say, yeah, I want to go and coach that team, get back into the NFL, and then you get the draft picks from that team because of Sean Payton's return. So it just sort of increases the likelihood of his return to have more teams available. The other piece is just sort of like the mental piece behind all of it, right? The more that he gets to sit down with teams and talk about coaching, the more he's going to want to coach, which lessens the idea of him going to or back to Fox day in and day out. So the more that he's talking about it, the more that he's thinking about it, the more that he's getting excited about the opportunities that are there, the more likely that he ends up choosing one of them, which again means that the Saints get that draft capital in return. Now, it's a very small, itty bitty chance that he also still returns to New Orleans. But again, I wouldn't expect that. No one should expect that. That's something that would just kind of happen, and then we would all be very surprised about it, and then probably pretty excited about it, right? Because it's Sean Payton after all. And as many people out there that are trying to convince you that Sean Payton and Mike McCarthy are the same people, it's not true, right? Because this didn't happen when Mike McCarthy was sitting out and not coaching, right? When he, rode the coattails of Aaron Rodgers and then ends up with performances like what you saw on Sunday night against the San Francisco 49ers, and an opportunity to be able to get it done. Bad clock management, weird play calls, things that he just kind of lets go, lets happen, things like that. Pushing like face palming video cameras, stuff like that. Like, just not very Sean Payton-esque. So yeah, you can say that they have a similar win record. You could say that they have similar results in the playoffs and things like that. But who has revolutionized the game of football? Who popularized the sixth offensive line? Who made quarterbacks or teams go out there and draft athletic quarterbacks way higher than they should have or at all to try to replicate Taysom Hill? Who goes out there and brings in a third round running back and makes every team around the NFL want to find their version of that third round running back? Sean Payton, not Mike McCarthy. So they're not the same. And that's one of the things that benefits the New Orleans Saints, because it's likely that Sean Payton goes back to coaching. I'm saying like 60-40 back to coaching versus Fox at this point, right? Especially with the addition of the Arizona Cardinals actually getting an interview scheduled. So I'm sure that there were some hurdles that had to be crossed there. Some things like making sure they get the GM in line, making sure that Payton's okay with the GM. There's going to be a bunch of hurdles there. But again, the thing that's good for the New Orleans Saints is simply that the Arizona Cardinals are part of the conversation. Whether or not they actually trade him to the Arizona Cardinals is kind of beside the point. The fact that he's a part of the conversation at all is good. And like I mentioned, because the Arizona Cardinals only have a top 3 pick in the first round, they don't have a later pick like the Houston Texans do. It makes it extremely unlikely you're getting a 2023 first round pick from the Arizona Cardinals. So maybe you don't even want to trade him to Arizona anyway. But him being a part of, or them being a part of the conversation, is the best case scenario for New Orleans. The more teams that are a part of this, the better off it all works out for them. All right, coming up next, more Taysom Hill equals more wins. We've seen it time and time again. That's what the New Orleans Saints are going to need to do in 2023 if they want to get back to the playoffs. Let's break it down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our new partners that we're very excited to have here on the Locked On Podcast Network, FanDuel Sportsbook. We're really, really excited about our new sports partnership here at Locked On, because these guys over at FanDuel are the number one sportsbook in America. So if you are new to FanDuel by any chance, it's even better because they've got some really great features. They have a lot of things that help making betting fun and super easy, but also new customers that join today are going to be able to get started with a $150 in free bet credit guaranteed when you place your first bet of $5 or more. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel has all of your favorite bets, from the money line to the point spreads, the player props, everything that you're looking for. Plus, you can even combine a bunch of bets and even like check in on a bunch of favorites and stack them all up on same game parlays, stuff like that as well. I was able to catch the Cincinnati Bengals as 1.5 point underdogs. They're now 1 point favorites. So I'm hoping to be able to cash out on that as quickly as this weekend. If you want to do that as well, you can head over to FanDuel today. You can do it on the app as well. It's safe, it's secure, and it's super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get a $150 in free bets. Win or lose, doesn't matter. At FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. More Taysom Hill equals more wins. We saw it time in and time out in 2022, and now the New Orleans Saints are going to need to lean in on that in 2023 if they want to get back to the postseason. Appreciate you as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL as well. 30 minutes every day getting you caught up with the biggest stories around the world of sports. On Fridays, you get key predictions, getting you ready for the weekend's games. On Mondays, you get game to game, making sure you're getting that insider access to what happened over the course of the weekend. Find it wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. All right, so this is kind of our continuing series here of things the New Orleans Saints need to do in 2023 in order to get back to the postseason. A couple of things that we talked about was changing offensive coordinator. They didn't do that, but But if you're down with my crazy idea, my galaxy brain idea that I posed on the show on Monday, yesterday, maybe there could be a change to offensive coordinator without actually changing offensive coordinators. So if you're interested in that, make sure you jump back. Basically, the idea, co-OCs, how could that work? Broke it all down in yesterday's episode. The other things that we took a look at were, of course, getting a quarterback that's going to be able to run your system. Now the system's a little bit more of a question mark, right? So what does that mean? That means now you need a quarterback that can make plays. And that could be a playmaking guy with what they can do with their legs. That could just be a playmaking quarterback with somebody that has like that killer instinct at the end of games. Like there's going to be a lot of Derek Carr conversation over the course of the offseason. And even if you don't like Derek Carr, he is fourth place right now amongst active quarterbacks in fourth quarter comebacks, fifth place amongst active quarterbacks in game-winning drives. So there is something about that, knowing how to finish games. Andy Dalton, 2 such fourth quarter comebacks over the last 2 years. Derek Carr, 10 over the last 2 years. So maybe that's something that matters to you. So that's going to be that next piece. And then the other thing that we took a look at was basically just being able to build out this offensive system and adding talent to it. So the next piece here is getting Taysom Hill more involved in the game plan. And what we know now is that when the Saints get Taysom Hill involved in the game plan, they win games. When he touches the ball 14 or more times, the Saints win games. When he runs more than 10 times or 7 times in a game, they win games. When he throws a pass or scores a touchdown, they win games. Like all of this stuff is trackable. All of this stuff is out there and you can see it. And so for the Saints in 2022, we saw that over and over again. You think about the Seattle Seahawks game. You think about even, I know they lost the Arizona Cardinals game, but he scored a touchdown in that game, which drastically boosted their odds to the point where they only lost by effectively less than 2 scores, right? A very small version of 2 scores, despite throwing 2 pick sixes and 3 interceptions to end the second half or in the first half. Like there's a lot of stuff that Taysom Hill comes in and does. The Rams game, you look towards the end of the season as well. The Cleveland Browns game, he was the one that iced the game against Philadelphia as well in Philly. Like everything that he does from that perspective wins you games. And the issue that the Saints had so often in 2022 is that Taysom Hill would pop off and have this great performance, and then the next day the next game he didn't touch the ball, didn't get any touches, didn't get snaps, didn't see any quarterback snaps, anything like that. Whereas with the Saints, like you can see it, right? Like you can watch it. You can see when he takes 10 or more quarterback snaps, what happens? They win games more often than not. And so the big thing in 2023 is if Taysom Hill is still on the roster, I'll explain that in a moment, is that you can't let Taysom Hill sparingly be a part of your offense. You can't save him for the end of the season. You can't make that a thing. You have to just be able to create tendencies with him early in the season and break those tendencies with him later in the season. He has to be a part of the game plan more times than not. There could certainly be games that you come in and you look at the secondary and you go, okay, the opposing secondary the Saints are going up against is a vulnerable one. They have a lot of trouble with speedy wide receivers. The Saints have Chris Olave. They've got Rashid Shaheed. They added somebody in free agency. They went out and added another piece of talent in the draft, whatever it might be, a Rashi Rice or something like that. And then they deploy those guys. They get them out there. And then they attack through the passing game. Absolutely, that should be an option for this team. And maybe that sort of diminishes what Taysom Hill's role is in terms of how often he touches the ball or whatever. But it's because you have a clear game plan to attack a team a certain way. When you don't have a clear game plan to attack a team a certain way and you're not putting the ball in the hands of your playmakers like Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, a combination of 3 things that we saw several times in the New Orleans Saints offense approach in 2022, you're going to lose games. And what happened? The Saints lost 10 games. The Saints lost 10 games. And they lost 10 games for the first time in a long time. And so when you look at where the Saints can get him more involved, you want to keep getting him involved in the run game. Yeah, but the entire deal in 2022 was moving him over to the tight end position, making him a little bit more a part of the passing game. And the Saints did not do that in 2022. I'm grabbing his target count right now. But when you look at the way that he was really utilized, it was mostly, he spent over 120, 140 snaps at quarterback, but he spent just over 50 lining up in line at tight end. So he didn't even really play the role that they made such a big deal about changing his designation for and saying that he wouldn't be a part of the quarterback conversation or anything like that anymore. He was targeted 13 times in 2022, 13 times for 77 yards. Now, he scored 2 touchdowns, and we're grateful for those, of course, but 13 times for a guy that you moved to tight end. Keep in mind that in 2019, he was targeted 22 times. In 2020, he was targeted 12 times. So he was only targeted once more than he was targeted in seasons. He was targeted 6 times in 2021, and he spent most of that season playing quarterback. What? So these are the things that the New Orleans Saints have to get fixed, right? You have to build this offense and make sure that there's a part of that Taysom Hill is a part of it week in and week out, again, with the exceptions here and there where you can attack a team a certain way. This is especially important in a season where you expect to not have Alvin Kamara for potentially 6 or more games. Like, we still don't actually know what Alvin Kamara's suspension is going to look like. So that makes it all the more important, imperative, pivotal, however it is that you want to say it, to get Taysom Hill involved in that offense week in, week out, day in, day out, game in, game out, however it is that you want to look at it. Now, I made the allusion earlier that now that's assuming that the Saints have Taysom Hill on the roster. That's mostly just me poking fun at the idea that if Sean Payton ends up coaching somewhere, that he has mentioned that in a year or two, he would want to call up Mickey Loomis and see what it would take to trade for Taysom Hill. Well, if he starts coaching again, that's the in a year. So there's a chance that Sean Payton calls up Mickey Loomis and says, all right, what do I have to do to get Taysom Hill about your hands? And then see what that ends up doing. Now, keep in mind, whatever team lands Sean Payton has to trade away a bunch of draft capital to get Sean Payton. So if it's the Denver Broncos, for instance, they've got a first, a pair of 3s, and then like a 4th. And then they've got more towards day 4, but they're day 3, but they might not have anything in day 1 or day 2 by the time that the Saints are done, right? So like if the Saints get a first and a third, or a first and a pair of thirds up out of Denver for 2023, how likely is it that they're also going to call up the Saints later on in that year and say, hey, can we give you some 2024 draft assets for a Taysom Hill? I don't know if that really happens, right? But the Saints could go that route and every team, let's be real, every team has a price for just about every player. So there's a chance that Taysom Hill could potentially be on the move, but I think that would be at least mostly unlikely at this time. We'll see how things pan out, though, over the course of the off season. But if Taysom Hill is indeed on the roster in 2023, which we all expect, then they should build the offense a little bit more around him, get him more uniquely and reliably and consistently involved. Coming up next, what's the bar for the New Orleans Saints in 2023? A lot of Saints fans are a little bit down on the Saints going into 2023, and maybe a lot of down on the New Orleans Saints going into 2023. So what do they have to prove? What do they have to do next season to prove that they're on the right track? We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints, answering the question, what do the New Orleans Saints have to do to win your confidence back in 2023? Now, over the course of the offseason, I'm going to be asking questions like this that I'll answer with my thoughts on the show, but it's important to me. I want to hear your thoughts on this stuff too. So if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola, or you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Locked On Saints. I'm going to drop the question in there as well. Get all that done. So if you're somebody that is down on the New Orleans Saints in 2023 because their 2022 performance, not making changes to the coaching staff, things like that, going into 2023, what do they have to do to win your confidence back for 2024? Now, there are a couple of different ways I think that you can kind of answer this, right? Like, you could say that the thing that will give you faith in the New Orleans Saints in 2024 is that they get the number 1 overall pick and you know that they're in line to draft Caleb Williams. And I get that. Like, if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. I think there might be some other people who will be quick to say that, well, the Saints have to win a Super Bowl. They have to get to the Super Bowl. And I completely understand that too. But I also think that like this team isn't going to the Super Bowl in 2023. Like, we know this, right? Like, I'm usually a very optimistic person. I get very excited about what the Saints are doing and things like that. And I love covering this team and everything. But like, we understand the reality that them going to the Super Bowl or even the NFC Championship game in 2023 feels like a little bit of a long shot. Like, them winning their division feels within range because the division is going to be awful in 2022 and like in 2023. But please understand, like, this isn't me like just being, a butt or whatever about the Saints. my refusal to want to curse on this show sometimes makes me talk like a 7th grader, and not even a 7th grader, a 7-year-old. And I love it because it is the weirdest juxtaposition of my entire life. Because I like to believe that I try to bring, like, my goal with this show is to bring like smart, fun, passionate Saints talk. And so I like the smart part. But then when I turn that around and I say, I'm not trying to be a butt, and I talk like a 7-year-old, it's hysterical to me. But anyway, the Saints going into 2023, I think a reasonable sort of bar for them is to make the playoffs and potentially win a playoff game. And I would even go so far as to say winning a playoff game. And that would make you feel better about them, right? You want that sort of, if the Saints went on to be a losing team for the next 3 years, right? Or let me not say it that way. If the Saints would have been a losing team for the last 3 or 4 years, I think you would take a Detroit Lions type season in 2023 and be like, okay, there it is. You could see it, right? Like you could see the passion, you can see the culture, you could see them like going out there and winning a week 18 game against a hated division rival, keeping them out of the playoffs, celebrating that win. Like you could see all of that and go, okay, on the right track. Now I get it. I see the vision, blah, blah, blah. I don't think the Saints are in that position because they haven't been bad long enough yet, right? You have to be bad for a long time, and then the bar starts to come down in terms of like what is improvement. But for the Saints, improvement for them is still one that expects them to win games, right? Doesn't mean they have to win 10 games. Doesn't mean they have to win 13 games. Doesn't mean they have to win 17 games, 15 games. It just means that like kind of like win the division, get to the playoffs, win a playoff game. Easier said than done. Easier said than done. I completely understand that. But I do think that is where the Saints are right now in terms of proving to you from their perspective, right? If I'm the Saints, what I'm trying to tell you in that is, hey, we're making the right decisions. We know where we're headed. Very clear path. We see the improvement from 2023 to 2022 to 2023. We know exactly what to do next going from 2023 to 2024. Right now, it's hard to say that the Saints have a clear direction because we haven't seen them take advantage of a clear direction yet, right? Isn't that fair to say? I think so. And so right now, there's a lot of question marks around the team, right? What's it going to be like in terms of the play calling? Like, how is the offense going to take a step forward? Ryan Nielsen has done interviews with the Minnesota Vikings. He was also asked to do an interview with the Atlanta Falcons. Is he going to get hired away? Chris Richard doing interviews with the Carolina Panthers. Is he going to get hired away? If they do, how does that impact the defense? Cameron Jordan's getting older. DeMario Davis is getting older, but they're still really good football players. So can they get it together from 2023 and help these guys, this team, take that next step really quickly, right? And we've spoken about this on the show several times. Anytime that you're replacing a quarterback and you're trying to find your next quarterback, and I know Jameis Winston is on the roster right now, but it's hard to believe that he's going to be at the beginning or really by mid-March, like whenever everything kind of becomes guaranteed and is ready to accelerate for 2023. It just doesn't seem likely. So I get that. But the caveat to what I'm saying is, so we can caveat that if we want to, but what I'm really trying to say here is that anytime that you're addressing your quarterback room, you're rebuilding to an extent. Like you're doing that. You're going out, you're looking for the trade market, you're going to free agency, you're trying to land that guy in the draft, you're trying to trade up in the draft, trying to do all the things that rebuilding franchises do. And so for the Saints, I think them getting past that and seeing success to that level, winning multiple games, winning the division, improving on their 2022 record, getting into the postseason might be enough for most people. Winning a postseason game should be enough for the rest of people, right? And advancing to a divisional round game. Can they do that? I don't know. It's hard to say right now. We'll have to see what the roster looks like going into the year, all of that. But I think that's the bar that the Saints have to clear if they want to quickly re-engage their fan base, reignite their fan base, and promise their fan base, show their fan base that they're headed in the right direction. If they can't do that in 2023, it doesn't mean that they can't still have a good season. It just means they might have to do a little bit more work in 2024, a little bit more work in 2025 in terms of reigniting this fan base over and over again, which is a very, very passionate, very, very, very committed fan base. Like fans are going to be fans, but the enthusiasm within the fan base can change, can shift, right? That's not the call. That's why I hate the idea of like, oh, if you're a real fan, then this. If you're a fake fan, then this, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Every fan has a different level of enthusiasm while still being a fan. And if the Saints want the most enthusiasm from their fans as quickly as possible, winning a playoff game in 2023 is probably what it's going to take. All right, y'all. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, more updates, of course, continuing to track Payton Watch to see where all of that heads. We'll do a midweek mock draft just for fun as well. And we'll take a look at one of the biggest questions facing the New Orleans Saints this offseason. But this time we're going to flip the script over to the defensive side. What should the Saints do with some of their key older veteran players this offseason? So we're going to break all of that down in tomorrow's Wednesday episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL as well, wherever you get your podcast. and on YouTube. Also, as always, I want to say thank you very much for making me a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Learn how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.